Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse, and more particularly from beautiful Danville, Illinois. And welcome to Midday with Rev Don. It's wonderful to see you, so to speak. Wonderful to share this time of day with you. And I hope you're having a lovely day. And today is a day of much rejoicing because today is the solstice. And I want to wish a happy summer solstice to everyone watching in the Northern Hemisphere and a happy winter solstice to everyone watching in the Southern Hemisphere. And today, what we're going to be talking about is the solstice, and we'll probably do a small commemoration for it. But I wanted to start by acknowledging that depending where you are in the world, it is both the summer and the winter solstice. And as we were talking about yesterday, that's important. And hello to Mary in the chat room. Good to see you, Mary. And the chat room is also important. And if you don't already know, whatever platform you may be watching this program on, if you would like to take part in the conversation, you can type your comment in and it will appear in my chat room and we can interact. Hello, Janet in the chat room. Good to see you. I also want to wish a happy birthday today to my good friend Janice. A happy birthday to my good friend Sir Ebony. A happy birthday to Lord Gary. Happy birthday to my nephew Dale. Happy birthday to all solstice babies, and many happy returns to all of you. And it's also interesting. I've been noticing how many anniversaries are being celebrated today. Particularly obviously marriage anniversaries. And happy anniversary to everyone celebrating an anniversary today. And of course, you know, the solstice is a good time for a celebration. It's a good time for a wedding because often people are already coming together at festivals and other events at this time. So if you are among friends in a festive situation, it can be an excellent time to have that event. So we started by saying that it's both the summer and the winter solstice, and that this is important. You'll notice I have my sun and my moon today to show that same balance. Of course, solstices are solar events, so they are what I was taught to think of as petty sabbats or lesser sabbats, where the lunar sabbats were the grand sabbats. But there are other ways of referring to them. But they do commemorate the stations of the sun, and therefore they are sacred to the yang side of the polar powers. Hello, Bradley. Good to see you in the chat room. The summer solstice is the height of that solar power. The winter solstice is the low point of that solar power. But they both have one thing in common, and that is that they are as far as that energy can go. And in the ritual that I normally use for solstice, if in fact I use a prepared ritual, we talk about that aspect of this holiday. That whenever anything reaches its most extreme form, it has to change. It has to continue to grow. And when you've gone as far as you can go in one direction, the only way to grow is in another direction. So when the sun has reached the point of the longest day, it can't get any longer. It can't get any more yang. It has to start going yin. And when the sun has reached the point of the shortest day, it can't get any shorter. It has to turn around and become yang again. So this sabbat, regardless of whether you're in the northern or the southern hemisphere, is a moment of change, a moment of having reached the furthest extent in one direction and the need to take another. Now, of course, in the cycles of the year, that's always the same direction. The orbit of the sun is what it is. And so when you've reached the longest day, you naturally begin heading to the shorter days. When you've reached the shortest day, you naturally begin heading to the longest days. In terms of our soul, the choice of direction is certainly more more broad than that. But with our soul too, when we've gone as far into one lesson as we can and learned all that is there, we must take up something new, something in a different direction. This is the nature of life and incarnation. And I think most of us in our lives come to that point at least once, if not many times, where a thing that perhaps we love dearly, we have done as much as we can, and we must take a new direction. And often that will occur at a Saturn return, because Saturn will put you where you need to be. But I think that when we commemorate this holiday, we must be mindful of the fact that, like the sun, we can only go so far in one direction, and then we must turn to a new direction. We also, when we create the sacred circle, we begin with the 4 directions, and we don't do just one. We go the whole circle round. And this is the nature of life. It's the nature of incarnation. We can't do just one thing. Now, I've talked about The Adding Machine, which is a film that I love. And I've talked about it in a couple of different contexts, but the primary aspect of The Adding Machine, for me, is its treatment of the afterlife and incarnation. And I made the point the other day that the view it takes that Mr. Zero's obsession with patterns and numbers was somehow detrimental, I can't entirely agree with at this point in my life, but I also have to say that isn't necessarily what it's saying either, although it certainly is on the surface, that he it seems to be taking the point of view that that isn't where he should have put his focus, and arguably, we are better when we put our focus on our relationships, but we're all where we are. We're all learning the lessons we're learning. And if that's where he was, that's where he was. But it occurs to me also that part of what they were saying is that you cannot follow the same path beyond its end. He obviously was not at the end and had more incarnations to deal with some of these same issues. But until you have reached that furthest extent and learned all the lessons offered, you obviously will at least likely continue on that path. But you cannot continue it forever. And in time, you must move to another one. And if we look at the nature of incarnation, and we look at the idea of as above, so below, and we think of the idea of deity as being ultimately the soul of the universe, the soul of each of us, of everything that exists, which is one of many ways of looking at it. Then it follows that the soul is learning many different lessons all at once, if we remember that time is illusory in the view of the soul, in the view of deity. And working on all these different paths. If we think of God, however you want to refer to God, the divine, as manifesting through the monad, which we might call the soul family, the soul group, manifesting through the soul, manifesting through the many lives, then we also have to realize the divine is being a person, a blade of grass, a dog, a caterpillar somewhere, every manner of incarnation. And within those human incarnations, that deity is being all the things we can be, from a scientist to a writer to a factory worker to a serial killer to a loving mother to a monster. And that all of these lessons have their place in existence, even though they're not all pleasant lessons. They're not all things the soul enjoys, but they're all necessary to the tapestry of being for reasons we may not understand. If they were not necessary, the bridge would not have been crossed. It would not have been. And hello to Janet. in the chat room, Janet Gann, and she says, Merry Midday Meet and greetings from New Orleans on this most sunny Letha. And hello, Janet. I didn't realize you were in New Orleans. But I did know that you were going on vacation. I hope you're having a wonderful time. Wonderful place to spend the summer solstice. So as we look both at where we are as souls and at where the earth is, we need to understand that all those things that transpire have their reasons. Now, that doesn't mean that we should look at them all as enjoyable. It doesn't necessarily mean that we should feel good about everything that happens, even if we believe there's always a reason. That doesn't mean that just because there was a reason something needed to happen, that a bad thing somebody did, therefore becomes a good thing. Or a bad thing we did ourselves becomes a good thing, just because the outcome was necessary. This is what things like the Wiccan Rede are about, helping us to judge what is a good act. I do believe everything happens for a reason. I'm a great believer in the idea of divine justice, but we've talked before about the accompanying view that whatever divine justice may be, it's not the same idea as what humans think of as justice. It can't be, or the world would be a different place. What humans think of as justice is basically what's agreeable to us and what helps our interest in the moment, even if we'd like to make ourselves sound more disinterested. And obviously, this is not the point of view of divine justice. So I do believe in the divine plan, I do believe in divine justice, but I realize it does not necessarily align with what we might like to see. The same with karma. A lot of people treat karma as something that's going to somehow give them what they want, which is what the practice of magic is all about, learning. So I'm certainly not saying you should not get what you want from life. The whole practice of metaphysics is helping us to align with our higher selves to do that. But karma, I believe, works through attachment. And this is a whole different way of looking at things. And if you look at the world, this is kind of obvious. So when we work with karmic disentanglement, for example, what we're doing is we're working with those attachments. And what does this have to do with the solstice? Well, in terms of incarnation, when we follow a lesson to its most extreme point and then turn to other things when we've learned that lesson, what takes us in that direction is attachment or karma. It's the karma that draws us back until there's nothing further to be drawn back to. Hello to Natalie in the chat room. Good to see you, Natalie. And Natalie says, I agree, everything happens for a reason. Even if no reason is apparent to me. At least that's how I'm interpreting the comment. And that's the thing. We may not know the reason. We also might not like the reason. If we knew it, that doesn't mean there's no reason. And that also doesn't mean, I was talking the other day about free will. And that if someone's free will is to rob or rape or murder, they're not entitled to pursue that free will if you can stop them. The idea that you must never interfere with a person's free will does not, in my opinion, apply in circumstances where you're defending yourself or others, especially against violence. We live in a world of increasing polarization and violence and potential violence at this moment, so I think it's very important to make that point. Just because someone feels you should not exist in the world and it's their free will to remove you does not mean you do not interfere with that free will. Of course you're going to interfere with the free will of someone who wants to remove you, or people that you love, or simply people who are innocent of having done anything. That is a free will that you oppose. Now, does that lead to further karma? Of course it does. But so does not opposing it. Everything potentially leads to karma because karma is attachment, and attachment is formed through our reactions to these situations. And as we go through life, those attachments will bring us back to what we need to learn until we have, in fact, learned it. So to me, when we look at the solar solstices, whether winter or summer, we are looking at sabbats that commemorate this concept of karma and what it does for us in existence, and a big part of the nature of incarnation, which is learning those lessons. And when we've learned them, we must move on. We must, by our nature, follow those attachments until we have discharged them. Now, there's more than one way to discharge them. One of them, of course, is to learn the lesson. Another is to, well, actually, they're all to learn the lesson. But you can learn it through experiencing the lesson. You can learn it through soul retrieval. You can learn it through energetic work. There are a lot of ways to deal with that attachment. It's not all intellectually learning it. There are other ways to deal with it. But always we must resolve. Rather than learn, I'll say we must resolve the attachment. It is important for us always to understand. So at this point, I'd like to take a moment. I'm not going to do a full-blown solstice ritual, obviously. Though perhaps in future we might consider doing that for the sabbats, but I did want to take a moment. And if you will join me. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we come to you in this moment of solstice. When we stand at the moment of chaos, when all things are possible, the moment of change, the moment of ending and new beginning. In this moment, all things are possible. It is the Fool card. Before the change occurs, we can claim whatever change we desire. So in this moment, let us all, in the presence of Goddess, God, and the ancestors, take a moment to claim the change we want to see in our life. As the sun changes its course on this day, let us consider our own course and where we want it to go. And let us now reveal our desire for the direction of our course to Goddess, to God, and to our ancestors. And beloved Goddess, beloved God, beloved ancestors, we ask you to aid our choices and to aid us in embracing them, and help us to go forward in the desire that we choose, even as the sun goes forward in its new direction on this day. For truly, whenever anything reaches the moment of furthest extension in one direction, it must turn. When the flower is at its most beautiful, it has already begun to die. Nothing can go beyond the furthest extent of its journey. And when we reach that moment, we must go forward in a new way. As we choose the direction for our journey, for some of us it will be new, for others it will be continuing forward as we are. But in this moment, let us be clear in what we wish to do. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we ask you to aid us in being clear on our directions and how to move forward. And we thank you with great love and thanks. May the blessing be upon you now and always. And I thank you all for joining me for that very brief meditation. I want to say hello to Jan in the chat room. So we have at least 2 Janets and 1 Jan. And hello to all of you. And it is always interesting, I think, to think about this moment. The moment when the sun changes its course, the moment when anything changes its course. And in the meditation, I referred to the chaos moment. Oh, and hello to Joanne in the chat room. Hello, Joanne. It's good to see you. The chaos moment, I think, is a very important idea that I wish I'd fully understood earlier than I did. But then that's true of everything. Hello to Kazan in the chat room. Good to see you, Kazan. The chaos moment is the moment when the old pattern is broken and the new pattern is not set. It's the moment represented by the Fool card in the tarot. It is the moment when magic is practiced, because anytime you attempt to do magic, what are you doing? You're interrupting the old pattern to create a new pattern. Even if you're attempting to perpetuate a certain thing, you're attempting to improve that direction, and so still disrupting the old pattern, changing the old pattern. Understanding magic means understanding and embracing the concept of chaos. Hello to Renee in the chat room. Good to see you, Renee. In this understanding of the term, it is important to realize what we mean by chaos in this moment. But when we talk, for example, about chaos magic, the chaos moment, and also the chaos before existence, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about infinite potential unacted upon. And because it's unacted upon, it can become anything. It's that moment when you shape the future. I think too often we don't understand that's what we're doing. When we talk about magic sometimes having unintended consequences, which it certainly can, it's because we're interrupting patterns. And so we must be mindful of how we're interacting with our patterns to make sure that we're only interrupting what we want and that it's not having a butterfly effect that we don't intend. Hello to Jesse in the chat room. Good to see you, Jesse. And these are some of the things you must consider in magic. And there are also some of the deeper considerations in magic. When I wrote the first degree, I did not, for the most part, talk about these deeper considerations at the beginning, because you're not really going to encounter them so much at the beginning. But they are something that you need to consider as you go, because the deeper you get, the more you're going to encounter them. The more you're going to understand them. We talk about the butterfly effect, and I'm sure you all know what that means. It's the fact that there are different iterations of the multiverse, different versions of this world, this life, all in play at once, and that we have not all always been in the same one. And so people will have different memories. They will have different experiences, sometimes of the same situation, because they have perhaps crossed from one parallel to another. And that is the origin of that phenomenon, and this too is a concept of deeper magic. But for most people, if they experience that, if they have any conscious awareness of it, it's easily dismissed as their imagination. It's only when you really are learning deeper magic that you become conscious of this and why and how it happens. To throw it out too soon, I think, only confuses people. But it is an aspect of magic. You know, I've talked about, a lot of people who teach magic like to take an oogie boogie approach. I am not an oogie boogie type of person. And what I mean by that is they want to talk about all the dangers of magic right at the start. And a lot of things they talk about aren't really something people need to worry about, at least at that level. Not that it's not, the things they're saying may not have truth, but if they're training the person properly, they should not really have relevance at that point. They're things you discover, things you encounter at a later point. But the real danger people do come to when they practice magic, you don't, in my opinion, come to until you're pretty deep. And that is that you can lose your place in reality if you're not careful. What do I mean by that? What is reality? It's your sense of self. It's your sense of your relationship to the world. How can you lose that? Well, when you realize that your relationship to the world is fluid, that there are parallel lives, parallel existences, that it's a multiverse, not a universe, that time is not as rigid as we think it is, that it is ultimately an illusion that does not deal with spirit, and that in the end we are spirit. When you find that, yes, you can shape your will in the world and shape the world, your relationship to reality can be challenged. This is why I say this is something we deal with at deeper levels. I suppose talking about it today, I'm putting it out to people who are not at the level they'll need to deal with it. But I'm not saying worry about it now. I'm just saying do know that it's out there. This is why it used to be said that someone should not study Kabbalah until they were 40 years old and had married and had children. The idea being that these things would keep them grounded in reality, regardless of their magical studies. I don't take that view, but I do think that for deeper magic, you must be grounded. And when I teach magic, that is right at the beginning, to be grounded. Psychic hygiene, making sure that you are staying connected. These are things I teach from the start. I consider them vitally important. And it is important, I think, to be mindful of these things if you're going to practice magic. You don't have to worry about that deeper aspect when you start. But you do need to worry about being grounded, about keeping your energy clear. And the truth of the matter is that if you're doing those things and the other aspects of psychic hygiene and shadow work that accompany them, which I peppered throughout the lessons that I created, and will also do with Psychic Academy and the psychic lessons I'm creating. If you pay attention to these things, you're not really going to have to worry about your relationship to reality. Even when you get there, you will have already taken care of that. But if you don't do those things, you can be caught. So when I say, do be aware that down the line with deeper magic, there are these issues. If you start pulling the threads out of your understanding of the cloth of reality, it could fray. Be aware also that if you have learned in a responsible manner, if you have kept your energy clear, if you've kept yourself grounded, if you've practiced good psychic hygiene, if you've done your shadow work, the truth is it isn't going to be an issue. You will have already dealt with it before you ever get there. And Joanne says, the first butterfly of the season just flew by. That's wonderful. That is a blessing for you, Joanne. And Jesse says, I'm in lesson 6 of first degree with the lemon exercise. Simple, but extremely grounding and refreshing. And I'm so glad that's working well for you. And it is definitely, the butterfly is definitely a blessing to Joanne. And Bradley says, I'm excited for Psychic Academy. I'm glad to hear that. I think it's an exciting project. It's exciting for me, and it's going to be very interesting because I'm going to be doing, the anticipation is I'll be doing those lessons live. There'll be written versions, but there'll be live video classes, at least initially. And that will be an interesting challenge. Of course, I do live video classes. I'm going to be doing one this weekend on the nature and practice of magic as a Patreon seminar. But it's a discipline unto itself. And writing a class is very different from sitting down and giving a class. And so I want to be certain that I'm as thorough as possible in that live class. Even though I consider that more difficult than being thorough in writing. So it's going to be an interesting experience. But both the written and the live video components will be important because I'm sure there will be things that will probably show up in the written version that may have been missed in the spoken version, because that's the nature of things. I know in my vlog, and we talked about this the other day, and I realize I'm going over the half hour, so I apologize. I won't go too far over it. But I realize that in the vlog, because I was almost always speaking from the top of my head, there are things I might think of later and think, oh, I wish I'd mentioned that. But I didn't. And that's all right. It's part of that format. But when teaching, I want to make sure I mention everything. So the live classes will probably have copious written outlines. And with that, I see that we have gone over the half hour. I want to thank you all for joining me. I know many of you are joining me during lunch, so I don't want to detain you. But thank you so much for being here. I love this time of day with you. I love all of you. It's a great blessing to me to have this time to talk to you in the chat room. And hello to Brenda in the chat room, who says, I don't think any of us mind if you go over. Well, thank you, Brenda. It's been a lovely day, a lovely midday, and thank you for being here. And Natalie says, where can we find further information on your new classes? And I believe you can find it at psychicacademy.org. Let me just check and see if it's actually there at this time. And oh, no, it's not there yet, but it's going to be there soon. At this time, I would say go to Sir Edward's page, and there are a number of postings on it. There are also a number on my page at Facebook. But if you go to facebook.com/EdAHubbard, you'll see a lot about Psychic Academy. And of course, facebook.com/Rev Don Lewis will also have some information on it. And there's more coming. And I'm expecting psychicacademy.org to be the place I would send you within a few days, but not quite yet. But it's rapidly developing. The classes are expected to begin on September 6th. So that is our expected launch date. And it's going to be the next big thing. Because why do anything by half measures? And my goal with Psychic Academy, or with the classes I am offering to Psychic Academy, I'm not the only teacher, and it's ultimately Sir Edward's project, but I will be one of the primary teachers, and my goal is to go beyond what has previously been done. Will I be successful? We'll find out. Or at least to go beyond what I have previously done. Because it seems to me that it's vitally important always to expand upon what we were given. When I created the Correllian degree lessons, I took everything that was in traditional Correllian teaching and more, and then added still more to create the idea of a more or less unified teaching system. Although the thing about the Correllian degree lessons is each teacher can add what they wish beyond that base, but everyone would have the same base. And I thought that was very, very important. But for example, in the first degree, I put much more than I got in my first degree. But it was also 20 years later. Of course, there's going to be more. And I often say that when I had my third degree, all those decades ago, Lady Crystal made a point to say, do not treat this as the end of your education. It's only the beginning. And I think that's true for every moment in life. It's always the beginning. They say it's always the now moment. It's also always potentially the chaos moment when all things are possible. It's always the beginning moment. And so I try to embrace that idea. I'm not always successful, but I try. And so with that, I want to say again, thank you so much for being here. I love you all. I love this time with you. And let us close with our prayer. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do for us in our lives. And we rejoice with you on this glorious solstice day. Those of us celebrating the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere, those of us celebrating the winter solstice in the southern hemisphere, let us unite together in joy with Goddess and God and ancestors. And let us be mindful of the directions we go forward in. Help us, beloved ones, to choose those things that are best and most advantageous to our growth, and help us to embrace a path of love and joy. Beloved ones, we know you're always with us, but from respect, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. And I thank you for your presence. Again, I love you all, and I will hopefully see you all tomorrow. And until next time, may you bless us.